Hi, this is Pete Gooding from Ibiza, musical director at Hostel La Torre, and you are listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Liverpool Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Daz, or Darren, whatever you want to call me, as long as it's not Dickhead. This is my football and music episodes where I bring on somebody that's obviously a musician, DJ, promoter, who's into football as well. And I can't wait to listen to my next guest. I know he's got loads of stories, not just football related, but music related as well. He used to be the general manager of 3 Beat Records, and if you were around Liverpool in the early 90s, you would know this record store. It was the hub of basically club culture, especially for me, especially on a Monday. After me hangover on the weekends. But it used to be a Wood Street and then moved to number 5 Slater Street. And we're going to talk all about that, his love affair with music and with Liverpool Football Club. My next guest is Pezz, 3 Beat. Great to have you, Pezz.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
And I cannot wait to get started. I'm trying to figure out, should we do music first or Liverpool?
Let's do music first.
All right. Let's go back then, because obviously, I know dance music is a big part of your life, but what was kind of your musical influences early on, like your musical roots? What was playing in your house? Like, what would your mum and dad be listening to?
Well, there was a lot of music played in our house. My mum was a teacher, and she also played a lot of instruments. She could play the violin, she could play the recorder. But we had a baby grand piano in our front room, and it's still in my mum's house now. It's been there for in my entire life, so that's 56 years. It was probably there for a few years before that as well. And I always remember my mum playing it. I remember the kind of music that she would play on it. My mum and dad were both into kind of folk music. My dad was a Morris dancer. So from a musical influencing point of view, the music that they was listening to did not influence me at all. But it did. There was a thing of where there was a connection that they had with music, and I felt that there was a connection to music. For me, it just wasn't that music. I grew up in the era of Top of the Pops, where Thursday evening came, the entire country was sat round their TVs watching and absorbing music and seeing what was going on. And there was lots of things from watching Top of the Pops that then did go on to influence me. I had a few 7 inches bought for me as I was growing up. Little Willie by the Sweet, records by Slade, Convoy, some mad record with 2 guys on CB radios chatting away to each other with some kind of song thing to it. Weird novelty kind of nonsense stuff. But the first things that really properly connected with me was electronic music. And it was things like, so the first record that I ever bought was a 7-inch single of Gary Newman, Cars. And I'd seen him previously in Tubeway Army on Top of the Pops. And it was just like, who's this? And what on earth's going on there? He's not looking at the camera. He's dressed weird. There's this kind of electronic, noisy, almost punk music, but it wasn't. It was electronic. And there was things like that kind of like really influenced me kind of like early on. But probably the first artist I kind of fell in love with was Adam and the Ants. And there was something about the theatre of how he dressed up and how the band dressed up that kind of somehow captured me, and off I went down that route. And years later, when I was thinking about, it was someone. I had a conversation with someone probably in the late 80s about, like, you know, what influenced you and how did you get to where you got to. And I think one of the things that sort of clicked with me was this electronic music, and Adam and the Ants did actually lead me towards house music, because Adam and the Ants had two drummers. Have you ever heard of a 5-piece band with two drummers? So obviously rhythms and stuff like that suddenly started to kind of like get into me and started to kind of be part of what would then lead me down the path of, you know, the path that I went down. But there was also the electronics, synthesizers, you know, early Human League has kind of got like that kind of early house music vibe to it, where it's kind of, it's synthy, it's moody. There's atmosphere created by these, you know, these different instruments that were quite new, I suppose, at the time, really. Do you know what I mean? Because it had been guitars and stuff like that prior to that. So yeah, they were my sort of like first two early kind of influences. But it then quite quickly led on to in the early 80s, I got given a tape. And it was this tape had been given to me by one of my best friends, who got it off one of his best friends, who'd nicked it off his sister. And his sister was one of two girls that went out with these two lads from Stafford. And they're both from both from the same family. It was a black family, and they were traveling up and down the country, going to these sort of like jazz funk, jazz fusion, soul all-nighters, all-dayers. And they discovered this guy who was playing in Manchester, a guy called Greg Wilson. And this tape was not of Greg. It was of Greg Wilson. It's actually said Greg Wilson on it. But what it was a tape that had been put together by one of these older lads. And it had been recorded from a guy called Mike Shaft, who used to do a radio show on Piccadilly Radio in Manchester. And this tape had been edited together. So the first track, as soon as Mike started talking, it hit the pause button, then they'd edit the next track in, and then the next track in. At the end of the first side, there was 4 records that were like properly mixed together with turntables and you know, using not necessarily studio trickery, but like nightclub trickery to kind of get everything to blend together. You flip the tape over onto the other side, and almost the entire side was a mix. Now, this tape that I got suddenly sent me off into like, what on earth is this? Where has this come from? What are these records? Who knows what these things are? Nobody knew what they were, but it'd been passed to me. It passed to me from Rob, and I absolutely fell in love with this music. Almost at the same time, electro and early hip hop was coming into this country, and me being the kind of guy that I am, where I'm quite easily influenced and can jump onto like fads. I was mad into skateboards. I was mad into BMXing. As soon as like breakdancing comes along, I'm having a go at that. Do you know what I mean? Let's see whether we can learn to spin on me back and on me head and whatever. So this music somehow it was hugely connected into that, even though the music that was on this tape. I've met Greg like later on in life, and he was one of the first people to play things like Planet Rock by Africa Bambaataa, and proper electro records. The music that was on this tape wasn't really that. It was still more sitting in that kind of disco, you know, post-disco, pre-house music sort of thing, where it's still quite a lot of live, but there was just a lot of electronics in it as well. And obviously following on from the Human League and that thing, I could kind of like go with that. I was never really a massive disco fan, because the only disco I really heard when I was growing up was you know, Sylvester and things like that, and Ottawan, DISCO on Top of the Pops. And I thought it was kind of quite oddly naff. You know, obviously in later life, you can kind of go back to that disco thing and go, hang on, will you get underneath and you sort of like dip underneath the surface, you can kind of find some of the you know, some better music. It's not, it isn't just that pop stuff. Well, yeah, so that was sort of like my early kind of like getting into everything. But it's funny because there's a lot of I watched one of your podcasts with Mark Archer that you were talking to recently. Mark was from Stafford, and all of the story that Mark was telling, I'm sat there with a big grin on my face, listening to it, because Mark and me we were in the same breakdance crew. Do you know what I mean? We used to hang around together. He was this guy who'd come from a little village out of Stafford, so he wasn't kind of connected so closely to me and Dean. And Dean's the lad from Bizarring who Mark went to the recording studio with back in those days. It has this kind of there's lots of things that kind of like click and connect together with and but I think that's one of those wonderful things about music is it does pull people together.
Well, 100%. I mean, that's the thing. I've had Greg Wilson on as well, and he's an encyclopedia of music. And him coming from the background of not just electro, but northern soul, disco. And it was great to hear his stories, but it was great to hear Mark's stories as well. I'm a big fan of Nexus 21 Alternate. I mean, why wouldn't you be? They're originals, and it was just, I'm glad I still have like a good memory of those good old days. It's kind of like you want to sit on your porch on a rocking chair and tell your grandchildren about like the rave scene and the early days, and then you're just going to get told, "Shut up, granddad, you old fart." But because I know before you like properly like DJ'd, you were more of like a collector. Like probably most of us, I'd go into the record store, whether it was Woolworths or wherever, to pick up a 7-inch, the new Depeche Mode, New Order, Erasure. I used to steal off my sister and get caught. Her collection would go smaller and smaller, and it was in my room. When did it really start to, like, especially DJ wise for you?
So you're completely right when you're going on about the collection thing. And I had a really similar sort of scenario to like Mark. Mark was explaining to you how he learned to DJ from playing a cassette on what he only had one turntable. Well, I luckily, because I got one off Dean, had two turntables, one with a pitch control on it, albeit like a little knob, and it was a belt drive, and the other one didn't. So I had this thing of learning to DJ where I'd start my first tune on the one that would only play the one speed, mix the next one in, and then once I'd done that and I'd got that, I'd then stop everything, take the record off of that one, put it onto that one, so I could then go to the next one. And I didn't ever build tapes or do tapes like that, but I was learning to build sets. It was like I'm going from that one to that one, and then I'm going from that one, but moving it onto that deck, and then going to that one, and then going to the next one. So I was sort of learning how to do that. I got the first time I really got massively into collecting a style of music. I bought electro records. I'd obviously bought Adam the Ants records. I'd got, probably a pile of 7 inches at the age of 14 that was like that big. And then probably at the age of 16, 17, I'd maybe got like that many hip hop albums and 12 inches. But it was when house music first came along that I was like, I'm here right at the beginning of this, and I'm in. I've got money. I was working part-time. I had paper rounds, which sort of funded my trainer collection and my tracksuits and stuff like that, which was a sort of like a one of the things that took a lot of my money away. But I sort of stopped doing that when house music came along. It was sort of like back end of 85, beginning of 86, where it started to kind of come through. I remember we under 18, we used to go to this nightclub in Stoke-on-Trent in Hanley called The Place. And the great thing about the place was it was split into 5 rooms. And the basement room right at the bottom was dark and dingy. It was run by a DJ there called Trevor M. And he was a bit of a sort of, he kind of presented music in that kind of pop music-y kind of DJ way. There wasn't mixing and things like that going on. There was lots of getting on the mic, but it was black music. So it was soul, it was hip hop. And then suddenly there was this one day where we was in there and suddenly you heard this what on earth's that? And you just got this boom, 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 boom. And it was Adonis No Way Back. And you were just like, whoa, this is different. And then there was another one came on what is this? And we go and start speaking to a few people. We knew a guy called Daz Willett. And if you came across him, he used to be, he was a big rave DJ back in the day. He was also one of the resident DJs in there on a Sunday evening, which was this under 18s thing. So we were saying, Dad, what's this that he's playing? He goes, it's called house music. And it was like, right, that's it, we're off. So, next weekend, where did we go? I think we went to Wolverhampton and went to Ruby Red Records. And we went in there and we was looking around, trying to find this stuff. And there was a section in there called the house music section. They had about 10 records in there. And I think that was the thing of like, I knew I was onto it really, really early doors. This is pre-acid house. This is where this music was played in black clubs. It wasn't even in gay clubs. It was purely in black music clubs. And the only places you could buy this music was in clubs in record shops that sold predominantly black music, or they had big black music sections. It was where you could get hip hop imports and soul imports and stuff like that, and maybe even go-go and things like that back in the day. And it was just, for me, it was just a continuation of black American ghetto music, but it was different. It come from Chicago rather than it coming from New York, or when later on when the West Coast West Coast suddenly started doing hip hop and things like that, and it had its different flavor. It was different to all that. It was this other thing. So I initially started to collect. I had 2 turntables because I used to try and hip hop DJ. Do you know what I mean? I tried to all that kind of thing. When I wasn't particularly good at that, and I wasn't particularly good at it because I was trying to do it on belt drives. Do you know what I mean? Which is not the way that's ever going to work. But I kind of got into it then, and then we got to a point. My friend Rob, who actually gave me the Greg Wilson tape. We were due to go on holiday. We'd been on holiday. We'd done a sort of an interrailing type holiday. I think in 1987, and it was 1988. And we were due to go on holiday again, and he crashed his car, and he needed his car for work. So we had to spend all of his holiday money on getting his car fixed. So I suddenly got all my holiday money, and it was like, well, what am I going to do with this? And I think it was Dean said to me, you should go and get some Technics. And I was like, yeah, I should do that. So I went and bought my first pair of Technics turntables. They're £237 each, which is quite mad when you think about how much they are nowadays. So I bought 2 of those. I got some new speakers, I think the week or so after. And off I went into that. But prior to that, I had one gig. There was me and Dean, Daz Willett, and a guy called Colin Curtis. And you probably come across him because he might have been mentioned by Greg. He was a DJ who was older than Greg in the Northern Soul kind of era. But he'd also drifted through all variants of sort of black American underground music. And he found himself at house music as well. And they put this, him and Darren had put this night on. I've got no idea what it was called, but it was in a place called the Roxy Roller Rink in Hanley. And the Roxy Roller Rink ended up closing, and it became the club where Golden was in the early 90s. So my first gig was in there, but I was playing on Technics. And the problem I had was I'm used to being able to manipulate the record on a belt drive. I used to use my nail. They used to spin me nail round on the label. If you're going to look at some of my old records, they've got these weird scuff marks on the label from where I was going like that with me nail to try and keep them in spin. But these things were like rock solid. They stayed at the tempo they were set at. So you needed to use the pitch control way more, and you had to manipulate the record on the platter in a different way, a way that I didn't know. So I did this gig. And I absolutely hated it. I came out of the club afterwards. I was nearly in tears. I was like, there's no way I am ever doing that ever again. It's too stressful. It's horrible. I just didn't like it. I did not like that experience at all. But then ended up, probably a year later or 9 months later, got myself Technics and learned how to DJ on them. And my first proper DJing was actually at the beginning of 1991. So I carried on collecting. I bought more and more music. I used to, when I was at college in Stoke, my mom used to give me £6 a week for me dinner. I didn't eat dinner. £6 was an import. That's another record. It was always that. I'd go and work in Daz Willett's record shop at lunchtime sometimes, or maybe I'd have like a few hours off of lectures and I'd go up there for 4 hours and help him out, and he'd give me a record. It was anything for my record collection to grow and become bigger. I just was obsessed with hearing everything. I wanted to hear it all. I wanted to hear it first. It was just this insane passion that just drove me on to wanting to have more and more records. There was a year when I moved to Nottingham in in September 88. I went to university there, and it was the second year when I was at uni where there's a gap in my record collection because I had no money. I was absolutely skint there. The first year I used to come home every weekend and worked in this cardboard box making factory. And the boss there used to, he paid me time and a half on Saturday and double time on Sunday, even though I hadn't worked in the week. He was that desperate for people to keep the factory going and keep boxes going. So I was coming out at the end of the weekend, having worked 2 8-hour days with £175. So I finished my first year at uni with zero debt. There was money in my bank account. My record collection was fat. I'd had clothes. I could go out all of the time. All of my mates at uni were like, well, can't go out this Friday. I haven't got any money. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, I just felt like, felt like a king, really. And all the way through all of this, my record collection was getting bigger. I got Technics, and I was learning how to use them. I was getting better and better. I was sort of like that kind of archetypal, really, really good bedroom DJ. Do you know what I mean? So, some of the mixes, I started doing mixes and giving them to people on tapes. And some of the people who had them on tape were like, this tape's better than the Graham Park tape that I got from so-and-so, or this person's tape from there, or this, that, and the other. So I started to kind of maybe get a bit of a confidence about it, but at the same time, still didn't feel brave enough to kind of go and put myself out there to go and DJ. And it all came together actually in the back end of 1990. There was a bunch of things that happened. There was when I was still at school, when I was like 16, 17, I'd gone out with this girl. We finished. I hadn't seen her for a few years. And then one day it was the end of the first or second year of being at uni. I was back home in Stafford, and I was stood in the town centre with one of my mates. And suddenly this girl walks past with a big grin on her face. I'm like, who's that? And I was like, oh, hang on a minute, it's Claire. So we ended up start talking to each other. She'd got into house music as well, which was sort of almost inevitable because she was into sort of, all the old hip hop and electro kind of music prior to that. And what happened was she said, come to this Amnesia House rave. There's a guy called Sasha on there. And it was like, I've heard of this guy, but I've never heard him. Let's go to Amnesia with her. So I went to Amnesia with her and heard Sasha for the first time. And I was like, oh, he's good. He does things a slightly different way. Prior to that, I was always all about Graham Park. I'd moved to Nottingham because Graham Park used to play in a club there called The Garage, and it changed its name to Cool Cat at the point that I moved there. So I started hanging around with Claire. I tried to get her to come to Nottingham to come to this party over there because I'd met this guy in a record shop. It was a guy called Rick, and he was one of the guys from DIY. And it was late one Saturday afternoon. I was stood in the record shop, and Rick came in and he got these flyers for this rave that they were putting on called Rhythm Collision 2. And he was telling the guy behind the counter this story of what someone who was doing a PA had cancelled. So they'd got somebody else to cover for them, and it was Bassomatic. They'd got 10,000 stickers made, stuck them all on one by one onto these flyers. And the following day, Bassomatic cancelled. So they'd wasted all this time and money getting these stickers done. So I think it was quite an annoying. He was quite annoyed as he was telling this story, and he gave me one of the flyers, and I turned around, and on the flyer was Nexus 21, right? So it all ties back together. So I turned around to Rick and said, Nexus 21, I know him. That's Mark Archer. And he goes, how do you know him? I was like, we used to hang around together and blah, 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 blah. So telling him his story, and he was like, where are you from? And I was like, Stafford. And he goes, do you ever go to Shelley's? And I'm like, yeah, I go there quite a lot. And he goes, okay, could you take some flyers there? And if you take some flyers there and hand them out, I'll give you 2 tickets to the rave. And I was like, yes, sound, I'll do that. So took the flyers, handed them out, got the tickets. So that was my first encounter with DIY. I tried to get Claire to come to this rave, this Rhythm Collision rave. She didn't come. A few weeks later, she rings me up and she goes, we found this nightclub in Liverpool, or it's just outside of Liverpool, called Quadrant Park. We're going to go up. Do you want to come with us? So I went with Claire and some of her mates, but also there was 2 cars. There was Rob, who we spoke about before, and Dean, who's the lad from Bizarre Inc., and me in one car, and then there was the girls in the other car. We all go into Quadrant Park, and it absolutely blew my mind. The first song that I heard in there was Expansions by Elevation Expansions. Never remember which way round the artist is or what the thing is. That was the first song I heard in there, and I was just like, oh my God, this is absolutely insane. So what happened on that night? So there was a couple of things that had happened when we were there. I kept saying to Dean, I was like, Dean, go and speak to the DJs. Tell them that you're the guy from Bizarre Inc. See, you know what I mean? They might like some of your records. They might play one or something like that. So he goes over and he speaks to James Barton and says, I'm Dean from Bizarre Inc. And his eyes lit up and he was like, wait there. I need to go and get someone. So he goes into the DJ box and drags John Kelly out. He goes, John, this is Dean from Bizarre Inc. John Kelly's eyes pop out of his head. He's like, oh my God, your records. I love your records. Your record. Which one was it? It wasn't Technological. It was Ecstatic. Bizarre's theme and Ecstatic were on this 112-inch. He goes, it's been my secret weapon in here. And he goes, wait till I play that later. So a little bit later on, I'm actually upstairs and I hear Ecstatic coming on. So I'm like, where's Dean? Where's Dean? I look over the barrier and I can see him down at the bottom on the dance floor. And this thing's playing and everyone goes mental. Because everyone went mental in there I wouldn't say they went mental in there to every record, but the ones that were the ones got that reaction. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's seen the video of Enjoy Anthem and everyone's seen Expansions in there. There was a handful of records, Asher JJ Tribute that were just absolutely phenomenal. But I'm looking over and I'm CD now and I was like, oh my God, what must he be feeling, seeing and hearing all of this go on? So I went down and spoke to him and blah, blah, blah. That was that. The second time I went, the Dean and Rob didn't go, so I went with Claire, and Claire met this lad. There's a guy called Phil, and she kind of copped off with him. And after the club finished at 2:00, I think it was before the all-nighters started. Everyone was looking for somewhere to go, so he invited us back to his house, and he lived in Bold Place, by the bombed out church. On the right hand side, there's like row of terraced houses. He lived in a student house there, shared student house. We get back there, everybody else is away. They've all gone off there, here, there, and wherever. But he lives with a girl called Barbara, and Barbara goes out with a guy called Harry, and Harry's one of the DIY crew. So the next week we go back to the quad again, because once you've found these clubs that are blowing your mind, you can't stop going to them. So we went back the week after, and Claire meets Phil again, and we go back to Bold Place. But this time, Barbara's there, and Harry's there, and Rick's there, and Pete's there, and Simon's there. The entire DIY crew have come up to go to Quadrant Park. So we're all back in this. We're all back in this house. Now, after the first time that I'd gone the quad, and I'd heard this music that was sort of similar to what I'd heard before, but a lot of it was different. I'd gone back to record shops. I was trying to find this music. I'd gone to 3 Beat for the first time to buy some of this music. I was asking people about this, that, and the other. I was finding out names of tracks and this and things like that. I'd also had my grant check from uni, right? I ended up paying me rent out of, I think I used to get paid about 850 quid. So it paid me £300 for the term's rent, and I'd got 500 quid left. It all got blown on records in 2 weeks. So I'd got all of this music, all the music that was getting played in Quadrant Park. I'd got turntables. I'd got a tape player. I made these 2 tapes. I called them Magic Mix 1 and Magic Mix 2. Magic Mix 1 was way better than Magic Mix 2, but it was good. So I got this tape. And when we were back at Phil's after the quad, my tape was put into the tape player. And for the next 10 hours, that was the only tape that was played. It was just on again, on again, on again, on again. And halfway through the night, Rick comes up to me, the guy who I'd met in the record shop, and he goes, Pezz, this tape that's playing, he goes, who is it? And I was like, it's me. And he goes, no, we know it's your tape, but who's DJing on it? And I was like, it's me. And he's like, really? He goes, do you DJ? And I was like, well, no, I don't DJ, but I've got decks, buy records. I've been buying records since 85, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, okay, that's interesting. Think nothing of it. Go back to Nottingham. A few days later, I think it was like on the Tuesday evening, suddenly there's a knock at the door. I'm upstairs in my room on my decks. But Rick's found out where I live, and he's come round, he's knocked on the door. So he comes in, and I was like, all right. He goes, I've got something to ask you. I was like, go on. So he went up to my room, where he then sees all of my records, and he's like, oh, okay, this kid is serious. Do you know what I mean? He goes, we've got some shows on a pirate radio station called Rave FM. Do you want to do one of them shows? And I was like, yeah, okay. And he goes, we've also got this club night that we've started on a Thursday evening. It's in a place called the Stork Club, tiny little venue it's almost more like a pub with some decks in Nottingham. He goes, it's for new up and coming DJs, or for people who want to have a go at DJing to have a go. And he goes, do you want to go and have a and I was like, okay. I was sort of kind of getting coaxed into it and on being eased in. It was almost like they were like setting me up with an apprenticeship to become a DJ. Do you know what I mean? So I did Rave FM. I only actually did one show on Rave FM because it got shut down. So that was the end of that. I played at the Stork Club a couple of times. I met a guy in there, a guy called Stoney, who me and him became kind of quite close and was sort of on the same level as DJing for a while. But then little opportunities kind of came my way that sort of I suddenly just shot off. And he was more into this. His musical style wasn't as mainstream's not the right word for me to say, but like it was. I would play, bigger clubs, bigger club music. Do you know what I mean? He was always way more specialist. So this had sort of like started us off, and this was sort of like around Christmas time, 1990, beginning of 1991. Well, DIY were then also setting up some club nights, and they set up a club night in a nightclub in Nottingham called Venus. And Venus in 1991-92 was like Mixmag's Club of the Year or Venue of the Year. And on a Friday night, there was DIY did Bounce on one Friday. There was Flying on another Friday. Graham Park had a night on a Friday, and Sasha had his Zoo night on the other Friday. So that was the kind of level of where this thing was at. The first Bounce night was on, I think it was some point in February 1991, and the guest DJ that they'd booked was Sasha. And Sasha couldn't get there. He played in Shelley's earlier, and he was supposed to be coming over to Nottingham from Stoke, which is only about an hour away. He couldn't get there because of the snow, because the weather was terrible. So I suddenly get a tap on my shoulder from Harry, and he's like, "Pezz, you go home and get your tunes. Sasha can't make it." And I'm like, I'd gone in there with Claire, who was seeing a guy who sold substances. So I was already worse for wear at this point. I go outside the club and get in my Mini. There's like about that much snow on the ground. I've got to drive back, with everything going on, and get home, get my records, get them back into the car. I then can't drive my car. I'm like, oh my word, this is insane. I can't even get back to the club. I've got this opportunity. I somehow managed to calm myself down after like about 10, 15 minutes of probably huffing and puffing in the car. As you know these experiences. And I managed to get back to the club. I then go in. I have to go and get Rick. I was like, Rick, I can't see. I'm not going to be able to DJ. I can't carry me tunes. Can you go and get them out of the car? It's parked outside. So he goes and gets me records. Don't worry, Pezz, you'll be fine. So he brings them in, puts them in the DJ box. I'm then like, how am I going to do this? And then I think to myself, okay, go simple. I'd done a tape recently, and I was like, right, just play the first 5 tunes off your latest tape. You know where you're starting. It's got a bit of an intro. You go into that and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. First tune I played was Evolution, Take Me Higher, Sasha remix. Second tune was Bizarre Inc. Playing with Knives. I can't remember what 3rd, 4th, and 5th were, but this was the beginning of this tape. And I think when I'd got to the 3rd or 4th record, I'd calmed down and everything was good. And I was off. There was 2 lads stood next to the DJ box, and one of them leaned over and was like, "Where's this?" Was before I went on. It was like, "Where's Sasha?" I was like, "He can't make it because of the snow." You just see he was destroyed. Do you know? It was like, it was the worst news that this lad could have ever heard. He turned to the other lad and he goes, "He's not coming because of the snow." And then he turned around and said to us, he goes, so who's DJing then? I was like, "I am." He goes, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Pezz." And he goes, "What do you play?" And I was like, "You'll wait and see." Do you know? It was one of those. These 2 lads were both called Adam. Right. One of them went on to become a DJ himself. One of them actually, this weekend, I'm DJing in Nottingham. I'm actually staying at his house. I haven't seen him for a long period of time. Again, this thing where stuff connects you together. sometimes there's gaps of time and you come back and blah, blah, blah. There's all of these kind of things, but there's a gel that connects it. So I ended up playing. It was mind blowing. It was mind blowing in the club. I'm walking out of the club. Someone's carrying me records here, and we're walking out of the club, and there's two girls chatting behind. Sasha was brilliant tonight, wasn't he? Do you know? And I'm like, well, there's your compliments. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and that was literally, that was it. It was from that moment I was off and just started doing things. Dean, who's the guy from Bizarre Inc., because I've been really, really good mates with him, I ended up sort of becoming Bizarre Inc.'s DJ for a while when they were doing PAs, rather than it being, because they'd had a few sort of like really annoying scenarios where they'd gone into clubs to do a PA, and just before they'd go on, someone would drop playing with knives. It was like, what on earth are you doing? So I said to them, well, like, look, if I go on before you, I'll set it up right. I'll get it going, and then just before you come on, I'll just take it down. So as soon as you come on, as soon as your MC gets on the mic and starts doing all of that, it can start to kind of, take off and go and do its thing. And we did that. And the only time I played in Shelley was part of Bizarre Inc. The only time I played in the Eclipse was part of Bizarre Inc. Great things that happened, and great times that kind of, happened. And I just sort of, I think because I'd done the at home learning how to DJ, the thing that I struggled with more than anything else was suddenly being in a nightclub where it was monitors rather than my hi-fi at home. It wasn't clear, and I always quite like things. I'm not one for insane volume. So I'll always go in and I always turn in the volume down on the headphones. I'll usually turn the monitors down as well. Some people want everything cranked to be, and it loses that, your ability to pick things out and know where things are going. So the biggest struggle I had back in those days was actually going into a different environment and getting my head around that different environment. I think I had a gig this year. I was playing in Glastonbury and playing on this stage. It was one of the big outdoor Block 9 stages called Genesis. And as soon as I go in there and plug me, I was on after a guy called Gerald, plug me USB in. I'm starting to find the thing, and I'm like, oh my God, this is weird, because it's built with scaffolding and like these big panels. All you can hear is I'm like, how am I going to be able to mix and pick anything out here? And it was really difficult to try and dial in the balance of the volume of the monitors and the volume of the headphones. But as soon as I got it sorted, and as soon as I was 3 tunes in, I'm like, okay, I've got this. But it really reminded me of how it used to be, because nightclubs nowadays and every technology and everything has moved on so much that you very rarely find yourselves in this, in a shit show of a kind of setup. The Shelley setup was a nightmare. There was a monitor in the ceiling above your head that didn't work. So you were having to DJ off a wall of speakers that were like, 30 yards away. And I got onto the DJ box before I went on. Dave Seaman was playing. And I'm like, how do you mix? And he goes, you have to scratch them in. And I'm like, go on. And I'm like, what are you going on about here? And then I watched him. And so as soon as he was about to bring the next record in, he'd cue it up in his headphones. And then he'd flip his headphones off and go dip, dippy, dip, dip, dippy, dip, dip. Do you know what I mean? Whack it in. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes he'd be doing that, maybe with the volume half down, so that he could sort of pick it out, but it's not really interrupting the other records. And I used to watch Sasha in there. After that experience, I was like, how does he do it? Because he's not scratching them in, and he just had this movement. And if he was putting it in with his left hand, he'd put it in, and as soon as he'd let go of it, he put his hand into the middle by the label and just went, and he knew that movement on a 33 would keep the drums in. And if it was on a 45, you'd probably have to do it a little bit more. And I just watched it. And I was like, oh yeah, you've well worked that one out. Do you know what I mean? Because I was thinking, how's he doing that? How's he doing all that stuff with acapellas? You know what I mean? And sometimes when you're dropping an acapella in, and it's in time, but it's not on the, the upbeat or the downbeat. It's somewhere in between. It's on the and. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. The one and, two and. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, he's just. He always, for me, he was just always on that, on another level. It was like the little techniques of being able to pull off the DJing and the mixing, but also how he would construct sets and the music that he had available to him and stuff like that. It was you'd always sort of like look over there and kind of go, yeah, what's going on there? There was actually, talking about him, there was a period of time, I think it was 92, 93, where I refused to go to a nightclub that he was in. I wouldn't listen to any of his tapes. I was like, it almost feels like I'm getting too influenced by this. So I just took myself completely out of the thing. And people would come into the record shop and say, "Oh, Sasha playing this," and I'm like, "Well, I'm playing it as well, but I'm not playing it because of him, because I haven't heard him play it." Do you know what I mean? I'm playing it because I like it, and I'm playing it. And they picked up this tape once. It was a boxed tape. Sort of, they were like the brand before Global Underground, and it was cassettes before CDs. And I picked this. It came into the shop, and I was like, "I'll take it home and have a listen to it." About the third tune in was Danny Tenaglia, Bottom Heavy, and I was like, "That's not even a record that he should be playing, and he's playing it." Do you know what I mean? So at that point, I just went, right, forget it. Do you know what I mean? There's no point trying to sound or be, too different from him, or think that you're being influenced by anything that he's playing. You just got to just forget about it. Just listen to the music that you listen to, choose the ones that you want to play, put them together in the sets the way you put them together in sets. And the funny thing is I probably felt that I was getting too influenced back in the day, when actually I wasn't. Because if you listen to my mixtapes from back in, from back in that kind of era, there's quite a lot of them I've got on my Mixcloud. They don't sound anything, you know what I mean? There's overlaps of records, but there's as many overlaps of records with Graham Park, or there is with, even say maybe Andy Weatherall. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, I did have my own sort of vibe and take on it. It's the same as listening to, another one of your guests was Steve Parry. Do you know what I mean? And he's totally ingrained in the progressive house world. And his influence was always being kind of driven a little bit more by John Digweed than it was Sasha. But he doesn't sound like either of them. Yeah. And he doesn't sound like Dave Seaman, who he runs the record label with. Do you know what I mean? And and then you can bring Hernan in, or Dave, or Nick Warren, and they're playing the same kind of music in the same kind of way. None of it's the same, is it?
No, yeah, it is. It's crazy, because I would say I'm kind of the same way. I'm a big Sasha Digweed fan, and early on for me as well, DJing, listening to too much Sasha, I started to want to emulate his
vision almost, doesn't it?
Yeah, just because he has such a good ear for music. And his musical taste was just absolutely out there. He was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of the same. I wanted to buy what he was playing, and then all of a sudden it was like, I'm sounding like Sasha without being Sasha. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everyone would just kind of go, "Oh, did you nick Sasha's track list?" And I was hearing that too many times. And then I was like, I need to stop. I need to find my groove. And a person who I respect very much is Danny Howells.
Yes.
Because he came from the bottom, but, for years upon years, he was the warm-up DJ. He was considered the warm-up DJ. And
he was so good at being that guy.
Yeah.
It's easy to bang out a load of big records at the end of the night. The hardest part is the beginning. Another great warm-up DJ was what was his name? Tom Wainwright, who used to play in the Hacienda before in the later years when it was less Graham Park and Mike Pickering together and it was more just Graham Park. He'd play at the beginning. And they used to do a brilliant thing in the Hacienda. And I can never understand why more nightclubs didn't do this. They turned the volume down at the beginning. So even if Tom got a bit carried away and played some, slightly monstrous piano vocal tune, it wouldn't sound powerful because the edge was taken off. Do you know what I mean? And I think he was usually, he might play for 3 hours at the beginning, then Graham do 3 hours at the end. Something like that. But the volume would just gradually move up. But also it would gradually call you to the dance floor. But you also need the DJ to be playing music that is gradually calling you to the dance floor. You get in there and you're kind of like, yeah, here we go. We're ready. We're ready. Let's go and get me drink. Let's go and get myself set. Oh, there's so-and-so. I haven't seen him for a while. Go and have a chat. And your head starts nodding. And then it all just gradually comes to you, doesn't it? And you gradually go to it. And it pulls all of these things kind of pull together. But yeah, Danny was absolutely... He's one of those DJs who's, I think for people like us, we rate him, but I think generally he's probably a little bit underrated. You know what I mean? I'd say Lee Burridge is possibly another one who maybe sort of falls into that category. Someone if you know, it's almost like they're like little secret treat DJs that you know what I mean? The whole world hasn't quite cottoned onto, so you can kind of keep them to yourself and it's all a little bit special. Yeah.
One of my good mates is Pete Bones, Pete the Shaker.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Red Ant and Ugly Bug. And, he's always been so down to earth. I've known Pete for, nearly 25 years. And, he kind of said the same thing, kind of on the same level as Danny as well. It's like, they were all there at the same time. It's just that, Sasha, Nik and Digweed and then Oakenfold just got a leg up before they did, So it's like what could have been. And I think a lot of people didn't really appreciate what DJs like Danny and Pete and Tom brought to the scene.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah.
And for you, obviously 3-beat, massive part of your life as well, as was mine and my bank account. Like I said, Mondays at 3-beat were just hell on earth. Everybody jumping over each other for tunes. So moving to Liverpool, when did that happen for you?
So after Nottingham, I'd trained in Nottingham to be a quantity surveyor. It was 1991. There was a massive recession. One of the first things that gets hit hard by a recession is the building industry, and primarily building big projects. So I think there was only about 3 big projects in the country, one of which was at Manchester Airport. And I'd done my year training or year placement, a company called Hayden Young, who were a heating and ventilating subcontractor, and they had the job of heating and ventilating at Manchester Airport Terminal 2. So I got offered a job. So I'd left uni, no prospects for anything, but I didn't care because I'd started DJing and I was DJing and I was earning some money from it, probably only just enough really to buy records with, not to pay rent and buy food and stuff like that. So I had to sign on and blah, all that kind of stuff. I was trying to work out what to do. Got offered a job at Manchester Airport. So I was like, well, okay, so I'm living in Nottingham, offered a job at Manchester Airport. I can go and live in Manchester, or I could go and live in Liverpool. I know loads of people in Liverpool. I know the guys in the record shop in Liverpool. My girlfriend lives in Liverpool. Let's see whether we can sort something out there. And I was lucky that my girlfriend her best friend, who she shared a flat with, was leaving to go and work. And this was in May, beginning of May '92. She was going to work in Greece or some holiday resort and go and do a summer holiday working thing. So my girlfriend had space in her flat, so she was like, well, you can come and move in with us, pay off the rent. I was like, okay, sound. So I took this job working at Manchester Airport. Still had my little Mini, so I used to drive down the M62 and the M6 and the M56 to get to Manchester Airport. Did that for about 9 months. During this period of time, I was buying less of my music in Nottingham, although I was still buying a lot of music in Nottingham, because I was DJing for DIY, who had monthly nights and fortnightly nights in various clubs there. But they also was doing lots of things in places like Derby and Leicester, Loughborough, Sheffield, which was all kind of near there. So I'd go and play in a nightclub in Sheffield on a Friday night. And it's like, well, I'm more or less in Nottingham, go and see me mates in Nottingham. I'll go and buy some tunes in the record shop in Nottingham. So I've got different records from that environment that I can take to Liverpool. And then sometimes there'll be a different sort of vibe from the records I'll be buying in Liverpool that I'll take down there. Do you know what I mean? So it was try and find as many different pieces of music as I possibly can. So that was my move to Liverpool. And then there was a situation. There's a really big DJ from Liverpool, a guy called Vertigo. I'm sure you know Vertigo. And I used to hang around with Steve a lot. And Steve was working at 3Beat part-time. They wanted him to go full-time. They also wanted him to become the manager of 3Beat. The guys who owned it had seen the way that Eastern Bloc was in Manchester, that the people behind the counter, if they've got some sort of vibe to them, they're DJs. There may be someone who's on the radio. They've got to. Then the customer who comes in will trust them more. And I guess there is some sort of truth within all of that. And so what happened was, I'd gone and DJ'd somewhere on the Friday, and then Steve had DJ'd somewhere on the Friday. On the Saturday, I'd come back to Liverpool, and he was DJing again somewhere. So I'd gone off with him. It might have been somewhere like Charnock Richard. There was what was it called up there? Park Hall. There was a club up there. I think he might have played there. So I'd gone up there with him, come back to his. There'd been a bit of a sort of afters at his. Gradually people had left, and it got to the end. It got to sort of maybe about 4 or 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. We was working out where we was going to get something to eat together or whatever. And I just turned to him and was like, Steve, what's happening with this job in 3Beat? And he goes, oh, I've decided I don't want it. I don't want to work in a record shop. He goes, that's just not for me. I just want to be a DJ. He goes, it's changing the way I'm DJing. It's changing the way I think about music, because I'm having to deal with music that I don't like, and having to play music to people and all of this kind of thing. And I was like, okay, so you definitely don't want the job? And he goes, no, why? And I was like, I'll have it. he goes, okay. And I was like, I'll go and tell the guys tomorrow. So I'm telling Steve I'll have the job, but like, it's not Steve's job to give me, really. Do you know what I mean? So the next day, go off to work at Manchester Airport, leave there at 5 o'clock. The record shop shuts at 5:30. So I'm pegging it down these motorways in this little 1 litre Mini, trying to get to the shop before it shuts. I get there. As soon as I get there, you can see they're just about to pull the shutters down. I was like, need to speak to someone about like Vertigo's job. And they was like, oh, you'll need to speak to John. You need to go upstairs. And I was like, okay. So I buzzed the buzzer and went upstairs. Marched into the office, and I was like, John. And he goes, yeah. And I was like, I've got something I need to tell you. And he's looking at me like, who's this weirdo who's in my office who's got something to tell me? And I go, I was like, you've offered that job to Vertigo. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I was with him yesterday. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want it. But not only does he not want the job, the manager job of managing the record shop, he also doesn't want to work here at all. And he goes, oh, okay. How do you know? I was like, well, I was talking to him about it yesterday. And he goes, okay. And he's looking at me like, why is this weirdo telling me all of this? And I go, well, you know what, John, don't worry. I want the job. And he goes, oh, okay. Suddenly it all started to make sense. And he goes, come and sit down here. So we went and sat down. He was like, so what's the thing? And I was like, well, obviously, he knew me anyway. He knew I DJ'd for DIY. He'd been to DIY parties himself before anyway. The other guys had. You know what I mean? I probably knew Dave and Phil a little bit more because John at this point was starting to properly move into running the record label. And Phil and Dave were the two guys from the three of them that were still in the shop all of the time. The first records that I bought from Phil. It was a Monday morning. I'd gone the quad, stayed up on Saturday night, obviously not gone to sleep, stayed up on the Sunday, 10 o'clock Monday morning. I was in there buying Gillian Mendez on Big Shot, do you know what I mean? And then, a bunch of other records. I remember that record because Phil sold it to me for the wrong version. He played a version. I was like, well, that's kind of good. I'll have that. And then I get home and I'm playing it and I flip the thing over and put it on. I was like, oh my God, that's the one they play in the quad. Do you know what I mean? So it was all one of those. Again, going back to that thing that you said of like, it sticks in your mind, doesn't it? There's like, it's so powerful, that memory that some of these things do for you that you just sort of stick. It just sort of sticks there. So yeah, so that was me then. I then went back to I then rang my mom and said, Mom, I've been to uni, I've got this job. And I was like, I'm giving it all up. I'm going to work in a record shop because I want to DJ and do all of this. And she was just like, well, look, you've done everything that I've ever wanted. You've tried hard at school. You've then gone on to uni and you've done your thing there. You've got something you can fall back on. If it all goes wrong. At this point, everyone thinks that dance music's probably got another year, 18 months left in it before it stops. No one really envisaged that house music would still be, or a version of house music that's not too dissimilar to what was happening in the mid 80s. It's still there. Do you know what I mean? We still interact with it in these ways, still collect these things, still play music and entertain people with doing these things. No one was thinking that maybe we'll get to 95. Do you know what I mean? But we ain't getting to the year 2000. Yet 2024, insane. It was never going to happen. But anyway, so I told my mom. And then when I handed me notice in at work, that freaked them out. They're like, you're giving all of this up for, to go and work in a record shop. And I'm like, yeah, I really am giving all of this up to go and work in a record shop. And when and started there was a guy called Rob J who's already there. He'd started a couple of weeks before me. He used to work in HMV and used to work was the manager and ran Bluebird Records, and if you can remember that was down by the Blue Coat. It wasn't there for very long. He'd done both of those. I learned everything about retail from him. Absolutely everything. Do you know what I mean? From simple things like just dealing with your stock as it arrives and all of that. But how you need to be with customers. And I for quite a while, for a good couple of years, was probably that sort of annoying guy behind the counter who wasn't particularly friendly. Do you know what I mean? I was, and it was because quite often you were getting people coming in asking for music that I'm like, oh, have I really got to play that again? And you put it on and they'll be like, yeah, can I listen to someone? You're like, it's the one. Just give me £5 and bugger off. Do you know what I mean? But you literally can't be like that. And there was a moment that I had. Used to DJ, or DIY used to DJ for a guy called Alex Sparrow, and he used to run a night in. He used to run Atletico, which was there was the Big Beat boutique that Fatboy Slim did down in Brighton, and then in Birmingham there was a thing called Atletico, and it was that big beat kind of break beaty uncle acid jazz kind of kind of music that was getting played. And he got asked to do the chill out tent at Helter Skelter Rave. So he got his resident DJs to do it. And then he offered, like, I think it was like probably about 3 or 4 slots that were offered to us at DIY. So I got to play there, but I was playing at 6:30 in the afternoon. So it was the first time of really kind of going to a sort of like a rave or a festival kind of environment and playing sort of almost in the afternoon. So I was playing sort of like, it was late afternoon, early evening. I played for like an hour and a half. It was great because there was, 200 kids in the tent sat on the floor. Do you know what I mean? Doing what was supposed to be happening at that point, which is chilling out, waiting for it to come to them, which will happen a little bit later on. So I would think I was playing somewhere in London afterwards, but I'd got like about 3 hours to kill. So I was like, well, I'll probably get on my way and go to the services and have something to eat on my way down. But I'll do that in a little while. Let's have a little look around at, what goes on at Helter Skelter. And I was like, come on, let's go and have a little look in these rave tents. So I went into this one marquee. There was about 10,000 kids in there with glow sticks everywhere. They had them shoved up the laces in the trainers. They had them bent round in their teeth. They were like, they had them on pieces of string round the neck, but they'd have like 20 of them. And they're bouncing around with the white gloves on, with massive grins on the face. And loads of them just keep bouncing past me, smiling, so happy at the place where they are, listening to the music that they love. It suddenly dawned on me. I was like, I'm a bit of a dick, really, in the fucking record shop. Do you know what I mean? Everyone needs to interact with their music. It's theirs. And it's not for me to put judgment on them. Like, they're coming in and listening to, some weird Ramirez record that, Dave Graham's playing in the drone. Do you know what I mean? Or Trixie's playing in the drone. Do you know what I mean? That almost gabba techno kind of thing. If that's what they're into, that's what they're into, and I need to get over myself, really. I went back to the shop, and sort of from that point onwards I had a slightly different attitude. I probably had a different attitude to music, full stop, at that point. And it's not about, what I like is what I like, and what you like is what you like. Sometimes they might connect together, and they might help us connect together. But there's no reason for me not to connect together because you love music. And it's just different music to me. Some of it probably even harks back to me mum and me dad with the music that they played in the house, where I'm like, I don't like this. I don't get this. But I get that there's a connection between music and you. Something that's happening. Some sort of, almost spiritual thing that's happening in your life that's made that kind of thing happen. But yeah, it's... Well, yeah, I mean, brilliant. I loved the record shop. It was. I remember the day that it wasn't the day that we decided to close. It was actually the day that we closed it, and we called the 3 guys in who worked for us at the time, and me and John, the other 3 guys, the other partners from 3B had long left. They left in like the early 90s. Like Dave went off because he was more into rock music than dance music. And he went off to be a manager, and he worked with a guy called Rob Swerdlow and managed Cast, Michael Kiwanuka and Little Sims more recently, Manson back in the day. Rob Swerdlow managed Cast because he'd managed the Lars before that. So Dave went off that way. Phil got out of the music industry altogether, and he's now got like 3 shops on Lark Lane. One selling cars, one selling just sort of like fancy goods and bits and pieces. The other one selling sort of like furniture and plants and all sorts of stuff. So me and them sort of just became like me and John, me and John and Rob, me and Rob running the shop. But me and John used to share a flat together. So this sort of like carried on. We then set up other companies. We had this thing called 3 Beat Label Management with a guy called Andy Jarrett, and that ran for about 7 years, and that failed purely because a distribution company failed, and it was at the time where vinyl had started to dip. So shops were going, distribution companies were going, labels were going, everything was pulling everything down. in the end, we had to shut our record shop. And what we did, it sort of got passed on really to Thomas, Adam, and Jemmy, who were the three guys who were working for us at the time. Me and John hadn't taken any wages from the shop for over a year, so it was becoming this thing where it's like primarily me was spending a huge amount of time trying to keep this thing afloat, whereas whilst at the same time wasn't getting paid for it. We got a record label. And at the time, we had this situation. This was the thing that the straw that broke the camel's back for me. We had a record that was number 3 in the top 40, released me by a girl called Agnes. Yeah, and on the other hand, I didn't have £6.50 in the till to give this kid who'd come in to get his money for the CD of his that we'd sold. And I was like, how can we do these two things? I was like, there's a company called the BPI, and they're constantly out there looking for when people are doing things sort of, a little bit illegally, bootlegs and stuff like that, amongst other things. And all these CDs, the only money really we were making in the shop was selling DJ Mix CDs, Anton Powers, Lee Butler, you know what I mean? And none of them were legal. So it was like, we've got a shop here selling legal goods. We've got a song in the top 40. We could lose everything here. Right. And I was like, John, we probably need to shut the shop. And he kind of came round to the idea, because he wasn't keen on it at first, but we sort of like kind of, worked it through over a couple of months of chatting backwards and forwards. And he came up on that day. We told the lads, we told them that we'd spoke to a liquidator administrator, and they'd given us a plan, which was, rather than us having to pay the fee for the closing down of the business, these guys could pay the fee for the closing down of the business from the money that they were going to get from the government, because they were getting made redundant. Because the government, if a company's going bust, the government pays redundancy packages to the staff. The staff can't be held responsible or lose out for any of that. So they ended up getting this money, which they then gave some of that money back to the administrators and bought the shop, and they reset it up as 3B Records, and it ran up until COVID, which basically killed that off. But I remember the day when we closed it, we'd spoken to Thomas. I was adamant that there's no way, if me and John can't keep this shop afloat, there's no way these three guys are going to do it. And as soon as we offered it to Thomas was just like, let me speak to me dad. Let me see if we can do something. Do you know what I mean? He just grabbed it with both hands. Do you know what I mean? And actually dragged Jemmy and Adam along with him. And they then took over the shop. But on that day, everyone gradually left. And I was the last person to leave. Pressed the button on the shutters came down. And I went back to the car park by the 051 and got into my car. And I feel emotional even now trying to, explain it. I was in tears. I was like 18 years of my life doing this thing, running this thing that sort of, it's so much part of loads of other people's lives. I'm only on here now because you used to shop in 3-beat. Do you know what I mean? It's, there's these connections that music and things around music, nightclubs, record shops, bands, artists, do you know what I mean? Culture, clothes, all of these things kind of connect together because of music. Do you know what I mean? And it brings people together. Losing it was, it was a really, really tough thing, to suddenly have that as being a thing that was, you're drawing a line under that part of your life, and something that's been like a huge part of everything.
Well, that's your baby. You've created friendships in that shop. I'm sure I went in and I probably, I 100% know I talked to you, but maybe I was like, oh, grumpy bastards trying to sell me this crap again.
No, but I think the problem I do have with the shop era of remembering people and faces is, and there's there's a handful of people who I sort of remember from there, but they're all the people who actually came and worked for us in the end. I remember when Steve Parry first came in, I was like, who's this kid? Do you know what I mean? I was like, who he knows his stuff. Do you know what I mean? And we start chatting about this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, okay. So there was like a connection there. And he came to work for us, like probably about, maybe after I'd been there for about 4 or 5 years, about 96, I think it was when he came. 96, 97. There was a guy called Richard who was a student who used to come in, and me and him just absolutely got on a level. He was really, really into sort of like that American house garage kind of thing, Masters at Work, Todd Terry, all of those kind of things. And what he used to do with him is he got to a point, I think he must have come in for about 6 or 7 weeks, and he goes, can you just put everything aside for me that you think I like? And I was like, yeah. So I started putting he was one of those people who got the bag or the box, the little area where he'd be like, oh, Richard would like one of them, put that there, and they'd put those in there for him, put those in there for him. And he'd come in, and I'd pull the things out, and he goes, what have you got for us? And I put the things on the counter, and I split them into 2 piles, and I go, they're the ones you want, these are the ones you need to listen to. And he was the first person who just went, sound. He'd listen to these 10, choose the 4 or 5 out of those, add them to the pile there, and then just hand the money over. He didn't listen to the ones I said, you want them. And I think it happened because I think maybe the first time I did it, he was looking through, and there was something on a record label or by an artist that he wouldn't normally like. And he sort of picked it up and went, this. And I'm like, yeah, it's the track on the B-side. And it was suddenly it was like that thing of like, he knows I've properly thought about it. Because it's the track on the B-side. And I know that you wouldn't normally go for this. The track on the B-side, you will. And he just put it in the pile and didn't listen to it. And it was done. And it was just this done deal. Like 18 months later, there was a space, an opportunity came where we needed someone. And I was just like, him. We need him. Do you know what I mean? He knows that style of music absolutely inside out. And it was as time went along, when I first started in there, I knew hip hop, soul, house music, garage, piano, Italian, techno. I mean, I knew everything. As it moved along, I stopped with hip hop first. Then I stopped with soul. Then I stopped with techno. And it suddenly kept going down and down and down and down. And then suddenly it was around that 96, 97, 98. I can only concentrate on and focus on progressive house. And those things that are just on the edge of that kind of deep, chuggy tribal house, and those sort of melodic techno records like Knights of the Jaguar and things like that would fit into what I was into and what I would play out. It just narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. And you needed to keep employing more people who were specialists. Andy Nicholson, the DJ from Voodoo, he came to work for us because he knew techno, and he was the guy from there. So we've got a guy from behind the counter who plays in the techno club in Liverpool. So all the techno kids are coming in and going, it's Andy from, do you know what I mean? We're going to see him play with Jeff Mills at the weekend. Do you know what I mean? So you've got all of those kind of like little things. I always remember this little story with that. If I see Andy, I haven't seen Andy probably for about 20 years. I know if I see him, he'll turn around to me and he'll say, Tonto's dream, eagles pray. Because he came in once, and it's probably just after I'd set this thing up with Richard, because he was one of Richard's mates. And I was trying to do the same thing with him. I was like, you want this? And he looked at it and he goes, it doesn't look like the kind of record I want. And I'm like, no, you want it. And I was like, okay, let me play it. I played it and he was like, no, I'm not sure. And I was like, right, give me £5, take that record home with you. And if you don't like it, bring it back. I'm like, but you are going to love that record. And he came in the following week and he had nothing in his hands. And he came in, he had a big grin on his face and he goes, it's really good, that record, Pezz. And I was like, yeah, okay. It's all these like little moments of, but why am I even remembering a record that I sold to someone? Do you know what I mean? I've got tons and tons and tons of these. You remember what I remember one with Steve Parry. He came in once, and I was like, I was playing something in the shop, and he came in, and as soon as he came in, I went to take it off because I didn't want anyone to know what it was. And he goes, "What's that?" And I was like, I'm gonna have to tell him. And he goes, "What is it?" He goes, "It sounds like David Morales." And I was like, "Yeah, it is. It's a Red Zone mix of Pet Shop Boys." And he goes, "You've got to sell me one of those." And I was like, "Can't get it here." And he goes, "Where'd you get? Where have you got it from?" And I was like, "If I tell you this, don't tell anybody else." Right? He goes, "There's 3 copies in HMV." He just left. He just ran out the shop, ran down to HMV, got it, come back in the bag, came back, pulled it out. It was like, "I've got it." I was like, "Shh, don't tell anyone." Do you know what I mean? And it was like, I'm sure he kind of kept stum. Where those copies went, I don't know. Someone would have bought them. Hopefully some Pet Shop Boys fans rather than house heads. Well, yeah, it was brilliant times, brilliant, experience being in there as well,
Well, it was the best of times, I mean, we lived in a simpler life back then. As we all know, we live in this like social media bubble.
Yeah.
And you know what, Pez, because this has been so good, I'm going to do a part 1 and then bring you back on and actually talk about Liverpool Football Club, because I don't want to ruin the ending by quickly talking about Liverpool Football Club, because I'd have to cram it in. So if you wouldn't mind, come back and have
absolutely
talk
fine.
about,
We can do that. Yeah,
because I want to talk about the social media influencer stuff, and like you said before, just at Shelley's and the sound, how you have to really get your ear trained. Now you have tour managers going with these DJs. The DJs at the hotel, the tour manager goes and makes sure the sound system is good, make sure all the equipment is good. I kind of miss some of those days where you do show up and you're like, where's the other turntable?
Yeah.
And there's supposed to be 2 turntables and a mixer. What's going on here? And then you'd have to, then the promoter would ring their mate. "Oh, we actually need 2 turntables." It's like, well, yeah.
Someone would whiz one down to the club for you.
Yeah, and I miss the days. I mean, my back doesn't miss the days of carrying, a record box. All you carry now is a USB stick. But there's just the whole. It's the DJ thing has kind of got because DJs are rock stars now. Superstar DJs.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the whole? There's this pre-recorded nonsense that's about, because
so I think I probably come at this from maybe a slightly different perspective because of working for a record company, and a record company where we've got artists. So like one of our biggest artists is a drum and bass duo called Sigma. And when you see and watch and you see that what they need to do to be able to go and put a show on, it is almost what you said there about being rock stars. DJs are rock stars, but these shows now, people will pay, £100 to go and maybe go and see Camel Fat in some environment somewhere. It's almost like going and seeing, Taylor Swift or Oasis, or do you know what I mean, Coldplay or someone like that. Now, there needs to be, I always think there needs to be a way of blending like the 2 things together. It's like how you can't do everything on the fly and get all your visuals and your CO2 cannons and the screens and everything to work together. It's almost impossible unless you've got someone stood next to you who's done every single show that you've ever done in the last decade, and they know what's coming next. Because the thing is, they don't know what's coming next. I can go back to like one of the first times I went to Ibiza. I was DJing in Amnesia, and we went on after Adamski, and I think it was who was Adamski's DJ? Was it Sister Bliss? It was a girl DJ anyway, and she's there, and we're in the DJ box, and all you keep hearing from her, because she's DJing and playing music over the top of him playing his keyboards and stuff like that, and he's over there on a stage and she's doing her thing. All you can hear from her is, "Oh, Adam, fucking hell, that's not why we practiced it." Do you know what I mean? And everything's going wrong. She's under stress, and this is just two musicians playing together, let alone trying to pull visuals and all of these other things together into it. So I think someone told me about how Calvin Harris does his shows. So say he's DJing for 2 hours. There's a 20-minute beginning and a 20-minute end that's all choreographed, because it's all part of Calvin Harris, here we are. Do you know what I mean? And it starts and it goes into this sort of like flow, a little bit, maybe a little bit like how James Hype does his things. You know what I mean? We've all seen him with his kind of like his intros. But I was speaking to someone about how he DJs. He goes from, it's kind of like a little show of these 2 or 3 records mashed together in this live performance way into the next ones. And the little blocks of them aren't always necessary. It's not always a whole 1 hour set from beginning to end. Sometimes he'll move the things around because he can DJ. Do you know what I mean? And you can just go from, you can move it a little around a little bit like that. But there's that thing of, you go to Shelley's, and if you heard Left Field come on, you know that he's sticking the a cappella of Whitney Houston over the top of it, because that's what he used to do. Do you know what I mean? There were certain mixes that a DJ would always do. You knew it was coming. You knew that this was leading into that. That would lead into that. I've always had even going back to like the very beginning, like little runs of tunes. You know that this one goes into that one goes into that one goes into that one. It's a little run. It takes you from this chunky tribal thing into, we've got some beef going here and some synths are going, and we're starting to, where do we go after that? Well, I might go over here where I play those two that usually go together, and then I might go off, and then the next 10 records might be I'm just winging it. And then you might go back into this winging it's not working. Yeah, then they're not feeling this. I need to pull something back together. Let's go and do that sort of mashup thing. So you kind of got this way of it. You'll have probably done it yourself. Even you'll try to go, no, everything's freelance. Do you know what I mean? It's all free and easy. You will play certain records together. That's almost. It's not a pre-recorded set. I'm not into this. I think the one thing that frustrates me more than anything of like the modern day era of DJing is I've always had a great admiration of female DJs. There's something about how females go at DJing which is different from men. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot of the time it's less macho. It's not, I've got this and you haven't, check this out. They just kind of go, this is a good tune, isn't it? And here's another good tune. And I've gone from one to the other in a really good way. And it's just got that kind of thing. There was 2 girls who used to DJ with DIY, a girl called Emma and a girl called Pip. They were phenomenal. Absolutely. They had unique styles. DIY was really about kind of like a very deep house, slightly techie edge, deep, groovy house music. Emma had this breakbeat thing going on. Do you know what I mean? And then Pip, I can't even describe what Pip had, but nobody sounded like her. I could hear 2 tunes come on. I'm like, oh, she's on. Whereas if it was Simon or Pete or Rick or Jack, you'd be kind of like, oh yeah, it's Jack. Do you know what I mean? And maybe take 3 or 4 tunes to get there. So there's something about something I've always been really quite into with girls doing it, because they just do it in a different way. But I am so not into this girls on Instagram hit the go button and then dance over here and then dance over there. and all you've got is a crowd. You've got a tune going that's actually got some, good energy, and all you've got is a crowd looking. And I'm like, oh, hang on, something's gone wrong here. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, stop doing the dancing around thing, because they're just watching you, and they're not. It's not what music and clubbing really is about. I'd quite like, I'd quite like at times some DJs to just be covered up.
Yeah.
But Roger Waters, the whole concept of the wall was because he got frustrated by standing there and watching the crowd and seeing the crowd just sort of like staring at him, because he's Pink Floyd, and he's just like, no, you're supposed to be listening to the music. Do you know what I mean? I know, I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to literally build a wall in between me and you, and then you'll just be listening to the music, because there's nothing to look at. There's just a wall. So it's kind of, I wonder if something similar to that needs to happen a little bit. There's, I do like this. I do like the policy that certain nightclubs have of, no phones on the dance floor. Do you know what I mean? Try to do that. There's certain places where there's a little festival in Stafford that my mate Dean from Bizarre Inc. runs, and it's called Rotation. It's done in this yurt. There's about 300 people can get into the yurt. They're all an older generation, so the phones are gone. Do you know what I mean? And the thing with it is if someone does want to go on their phone, they move off the dance floor, probably out of the tent. Do you know what I mean? There's an odd bit of, the noodly beard scratchers who are doing a sneaky Shazam. Do you know what I mean? When something gets dropped. Do you know what I mean? But there's all of those things. It's a very, very weird world, the digital world. I struggle with it. We have to, with the record label, we have to engage with it and embrace it. And we need our artists to engage and embrace, and they struggle with that at times. But without it, you're going to struggle to win, because it's all about these. Do you know what I mean? Music is all consumed on those. The way you communicate with people and get them to interact with it is on those. I have lots and lots of debates with people online about, Spotify and streaming, and there's a huge amount of pressure put back onto Spotify, for instance, as the rates that they pay artists is wrong. And I'm like, is it actually wrong? If you're an artist now and you get the equivalent of 150 CD sales or 150 downloads, you get the equivalent now in streaming, you're making the same amount of money. There isn't a thing where it's not. What the problem is volume. There's too many records out there. There's 32 million records get put onto Spotify every year. 32 million, right? If you go back to the mid-90s, there was about 60,000 releases a year. Now there's 60,000 releases a day. Now, how are you going to cut through all of that? There's no filter. What there used to be is, even because you've got your equipment behind you there. If you made a dance tune and you thought, I've nailed it, this is brilliant, do you know what I mean? I'm going to sell loads of these. That's it. I can give up my job. I'm going to become a musician. Suddenly, you'd need to go and find $1,000 so that you could go and press some copies up. Or you've got to go and convince a record label that they're going to be able to manufacture 1,000 of them and sell 1,000 of them. So someone there, maybe it's you, maybe it's them, will go, nah, that's not good enough, that. But with the internet, every piece of music that's made, you could come off this podcast in, you know what I mean, when it finishes, and go over there and make a tune. You could upload it before midnight.
Yeah.
Just become part of the 32 million that's getting in the way of everything. And the other thing with it is nothing goes away. So you make yourself a progressive house tune. You're competing with Blue Amazon, When the Rain Falls. You're competing with Sasha, Expander. Do you know what I mean? What's going to make someone want to listen to your new tune rather than to listen to that tune? And that's an old one. Or listen to something that's new, something that Steve's just released on Celador. What's going to make anyone listen to that? And the thing is as well, you know, back in the day, artists, because Lee Softly from Blue Amazon is someone who I quite regularly have, and it's all friendly and above board, but he kind of gets frustrated because he's still a producer and still wants to do things and maybe earn money. But I'm like, back in the day, you would make a piece of music, you give it to Sasha and John Digweed, they'd play it for 9 months, build up some hype, then it'd get released, you'd sell 5,000 copies. You sell 5,000 copies, you'd get one, I'd get one, Steve would get one. I'd probably get it, take it home, play it once, probably never DJ with it out because Sasha and John have been playing it for forever. But it'd go into my record collection next to my other jackpot releases. And there it is. It's been listened to once. Well, if you get 5,000 people listen to your record once, you're going to earn about £3. Do you know what I mean? On Spotify, you earn about, or the person who's uploaded the piece of music and controls the rights to that piece of music. So it could be a record label, it could be you yourself, or it could be the distribution company. Will get £5,000 for every 1 million streams. Well, Lee Softly and Blue Amazon could earn £5,000 from selling 5,000 12 inches back in the day. But those 12 inches, and it, you know, listen, if you listen to something a lot, you might listen to it 20 times, but you're really going to get past 100 plays, 150 plays. What piece, if you think about the piece of music you've listened to the most, do you know what I mean? My daughter's, she works in the music industry now. And she interacts with certain artists. She listens to them over and over and over again. Ariana Grande, Billie Eilish, people like that. But she'll probably get to like 200 plays in a year of her big tunes. That's the equivalent to one sale. That's 75 pence going back into that artist. So it's got to be volume and volume and volume, but the volume is, everything's getting watered down and made thinner. So it's really, really difficult. But then the other thing is like, I'll go to a nightclub and hear a piece of music, or I'll be out in a restaurant and hear a piece of music. I get the bloody phone out and Shazam it, because I don't know what it is. Or I might know what it is. I'll forget what this is. Do you know what I mean? So I'll Shazam it, so it's just in my Shazam list. You know, we used to have this thing. I couldn't get my head around this probably about 7-8 years ago. You know, one of the big things for us, or one of the big things back then of having hit records, was you needed your record to be played on daytime radio. But you could see how it was reacting on daytime radio because people were Shazamming it. I was like, who's Shazamming the radio? You know what I mean? Joe Wiley will come on in a minute and tell you what it is. You just got to remember, people were Shazamming, and it was only then when someone said, no, you Shazam it because it's in your list. You've then got a list of music. You can then go back and then go and download them later, but you've got that list. You haven't had to remember it. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's different. It's a bit like recording Pete Tong, I guess, back in the early 90s, the whole show. And he'd tell you what everything is. And then you'd be able to record it, listen back to it. Oh, that is the one I liked. Yeah, it was called so-and-so. And that's why we used to get the lists of people coming into the record shop. Have you got this? Do you know what I mean? On Monday morning. No, we haven't. Pete Tong's the only one with it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's very difficult. Very difficult. It's difficult for labels. It's difficult for artists. Difficult for consumers. It's difficult for everyone, whilst at the same time being made much easier for everyone. So you've got this kind of, you know, it's this backwards forwards thing. You know, I don't like, for instance, from a principle point of view, I don't like Amazon. I still buy stuff from Amazon because I need it to arrive tomorrow. I need a new cable for my computer. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, I could go to PC World. They might not even have it. Do you know what I mean? But there it is on Amazon, and I click the button, it'll come tomorrow. so you end up going easy route with life because you can. I've fought for a long time to digital DJ, and you couldn't, I'd had CDJs. I had CDJ 800s, and very rarely used them. I used to use them primarily because when I used to write for Mix Mag. It wasn't Mix Mag Updates. When I used to write for Music Magazine, I used to do the progressive house page in there once a month. And the only way I could get hold of music up front enough so I could write about it so it was relevant for the magazine, I was writing about pieces of music like 10, 12 weeks before the magazine came out. And the magazine had last for a month. So you need to be like that far ahead. So a lot of people from record labels, people like Barry from Choo Choo or John Sutton from Evolution, they'd send me things on CD. So I needed a CD player to listen to them. I also thought, well, if I've got two of these, I can DJ with them and play around with them. But I never really I never took to that as a format. I think if I'd have had thousands, it might have been a bit different because 800s weren't as tight. So it never felt kind of great that. I sort of dabbled with Serato as a DJ tool because I could use vinyl then, and then people were sending me pieces of music as files. Do you know what I mean? Rather than even burning a CD and sending me that, and I sort of kind of went down that route. And then when Sasha went all Ableton with his Maven controller, I had to go at Ableton DJ, and I really quite liked that because I quite one of my sort of DJ things has always been is like at times I prefer the mix and the overlap than the two tunes. Do you know what I mean? Or you'll use things to kind of enhance that record. So there was a thing that I used to do a lot back in the sort of like in the early 90s was I had these records. There was one called Karina Temptation. Right, and it was a vocal. I can't remember what they called it. It was like sort of freestyle house or something, or freestyle from America. And it was like these Latin American female artists, full vocals, but on labels like Cutting, where they were sort of more like house labels. And you'd get a house version, you'd have the Latino version, but you'd have a drums a beats version. And I'd quite often use these beats. So I'd have a track going along and I'm like, right, okay, if I put these beats in, it's going to give it a bit more kind of oomph. But also, when I come out of it, it'll just drop down to beats. So it's giving sort of dynamic to the... one of the things I really can't stand with dance music is linear. Do you know what I mean? I get, say, Jeff Mills and Richie Hawtin on that techno thing where it kind of goes along and it's loops on top of each other. But where's it go up? When's that moment where it goes up and then goes down? Now, sometimes they manage to do that with these loop things, but quite often DJs who are playing similar side, it's just like, here we go, and it's just flat. So this kind of gave dynamic. You'd also have a thing, all of these beats ended with a cymbal crash. So you could let it run all the way to the end and then just put an intro record on, something that starts without drums, starts with a bit of a synthesizer thing. So you could almost start your set again. So it's building up and going down and and utilizing things. So I've always been kind of one for, but probably my biggest fault as a DJ, what my two big faults was when I worked in the record shop, I was so obsessed with being the first person to play something. And I would choose this record because nobody else had it, rather than that one, which is the better choice. That's the better record. And it's a difficult thing to work beyond that. I think part of that was probably that situation that you had with, one of the things that made Sasha was he was always playing records that nobody else had. So when I found I had a record that nobody else had, I was like, I have to play it. Whereas he would only play it if it was good. Do you know what I mean? He'd get all the good ones first. So that was always that thing. But the other thing was over mixing. I'll overlap records for too long.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't come out of it. Some people will do like that 4/8 bar thing. 64, 128, here we go. Do you know what I mean? I was always sort of striving for like that thing. Digital comes along and I'm like, just loop that, loop this, move out of that loop into this loop. So you start to find that like creativity can come in. DJ creativity can come in with digital. There's a lot of people who don't like James Hype. I don't like what he plays, but I'm looking at it and going, whoa, there's some serious like, you know, technique going down here. You see, there's a couple of kids I've seen on Instagram who redo his things, and you kind of like, and you're listening to it and you're like, yeah, you're doing it live, right? You don't sound like him. You've not quite got that tight thing going on, or you've not got that little, how he's pressing these things. He's got his own little rhythm going there, and I'm like, I'm quite sort of impressed by that, but at the same time, don't like the music that he plays. Do you know what I mean? It's not something I would never go to a club. You know, if I was in a club and he was on, I'd go and have a little nose, but like I wouldn't go anywhere where he's on. He's got that. He's sort of fallen into the right place at the right time as well because of social media. Because he's almost like a social media DJ. He looks like a fitness guru, doesn't he? Do you know what I mean? He's got his white sticky up hair and he's been them muscles. Do you know what I mean? And you're kind of like, well, people will be watching him almost because there's something to watch, there's something to look at. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's weird. It's really, really weird. I don't know, you know, and I can understand how some people get like dead angry and upset and frustrated by what's going on with social media and sort of, you know, how some of it is. And it's difficult because it's here to stay. We've kind of got to embrace it. But you know, in a funny way, you know, podcasts and things like this, they only exist because of social media. So you know, I don't know what your position is on social media and DJing and all of that, but like you know,
that's a whole another episode for me.
Yeah, I bet it is.
You know, it's tough, just because, you know, if you're an upcoming DJ and you don't have much of a social media presence, you won't get booked. And I just basically found that out. You know, I used to play a lot of the clubs and raves here, you know, 15 years ago, and
Yeah.
I don't really play out that much. You know, it's mostly if it's a house party with my mates, I'll do that. And yeah, I just found out the hard way. You know, I just had a promoter go, well, you know, what's your social media profile? And I was like, well, I have a podcast profile. I don't have a DJ profile because I don't play out as much. It's basically like, well, you ain't getting booked then. And I think that's sad because there's so many good DJs out there that aren't getting these.
But how do they cut through, and how are they found?
Yeah.
And who's going to give, you know, from a promoter's point of view, you sort of look at it and go, it's about bums on seats ultimately, isn't it? And it's like, so they get you, if they put you on, how many bums are going to end up on the seats? Do you know what I mean? And they could put you on and it could be an incredibly beautiful set of music that gets played and 3 people turn up. Do you know what I mean? So from his business perspective, that's of no use to him whatsoever. You know, it's but yeah, it is. It's completely sad. I think the one thing that I'd always say with those things, and it is, you know, Steve, when he was on your podcast, sort of alluded to this a little bit when he was talking about when he started running Alderaan, he wasn't getting booked to play anywhere. And he wasn't getting booked to play anywhere where he could play what he wanted to play. And he sort of realized, and it was probably from watching John Digweed run Bedrock, where it was like, I've got to do this myself. If I want to play this music, I need to put my night on. So he teamed up with Mike. And I didn't even know Mike. I can't even remember Mike from coming in the record shop or anything, or being one of his mates. But for some reason or other, them two got together and set up this club night in the most bonkers place in Liverpool, above it's just weird. Do you know what I mean? It was, but there was something wonderful about it. It was a brilliant place to go and DJ. It had, it had its own uniqueness, and it had its own uniqueness because it was them, two geeky guys being geeky about progressive house, bringing a load of progressive house DJs who they could get. They couldn't afford to get Sasha to come or John Digweed, but they could get Danny Howells to come, because Danny came once. Well, I think probably because he had like a gap in his schedule, and it was like, I'll go up there and earn 250 quid rather than earning no money. And he comes up and he just has a brilliant time because everyone's like super, super excited because he's a bigger DJ than the ones they normally would get. And he just has a wonderful time, and then he goes back to somebody's house, and and they carry on and have a great time. He meets some great, wonderful people who then start following him round. Do you know what I mean? They kind of go, okay, we're closer to Danny than we are to John Digweed, so we'll spend a little bit more time nurturing that one. Danny Howells is more UK based, whereas John Digweed's now flying all over the world. You can only hear him in the UK 4 times a year, whereas you can hear Danny 10. So there's all those kind of like little things, but yeah, brilliant little nightclub that they started themselves to get a place for them to play. Do you know what I mean? And do the thing that they wanted to do. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I get, and you do see it a lot. Dean with his rotation garden party, he wanted to DJ. He's also mad into hi-fi. So the sound system that he's built this sound system for the thing, and it was almost, he started building the sound system, which is like a supercharged hi-fi system. It's using the same speakers that Dave Mancuso used in the loft. These American speakers called Klipschkorns. And they've been in production since 1948. They've been hardly changed at all. They have been modernized a little bit, but the principles of them are the same. It sounds unbelievable. It's such an incredible thing. But he started that party so that he could put his sound system up and encourage and have people listen to it and listen to him play the music that he makes as Chicken Lips and Mindfair. And then he started doing that. And he got a couple of his mates to fill up the thing. And it was just a party on one day to start with. And then suddenly he went, guest DJs, let's get some of our, do you know what I mean? Let's get some of me mates in, or some people who, so it's the Idiot Boys, it's Bill Brewster, Cosmo Murphy, do you know what I mean? Rough Doug played this year. He was incredible. And he's got these guys, these wreaking havoc, these 3 people from where's the Wreaking? It's near Shrewsbury, isn't it? It's somewhere like that. Do you know what I mean? And he just built this thing, and he built it himself, and it comes from a sort of a passion of his. And what I would almost say to you is if you want to DJ and play the music that you want to play, you've almost got to go, I'm going to find somewhere I can put a party on. Do you know what I mean? And I'll get 10 of me mates down and let's see what happens. Do you know what I mean? Now, you might get 10 of your mates down and actually only 5 turn up. So like you suddenly go, this isn't working for me. Right. But you don't know. You literally don't know. You might have something that it just connects and resonates with people. Do you know what I mean? And off you can go. It's mad.
It is. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Pezz, to have you on. And, again, I could talk to you for more. No, seriously, we've got loads of things in common, obviously, music, our trainers, Liverpool Football Club. But I will definitely bring you back on. Quickly, where can people see your mixes?
So there's so I've got a Mixcloud account, which is Pezz 3Beat, whatever it is, mixcloud.com/Pezz 3Beat. There's a lot of stuff up there. I started doing mixes during lockdown, just as something to do. Whereas people like Steve went and started doing streaming and things like that. I just did mixing. I just did some mixes and started putting them up. We lost Glastonbury that year, so I did my first mix was called Locked Down in the Naughty Corner, because obviously the dance area of Glastonbury is called the Naughty Corner. So off I went, and it's actually quite funny. Look, if you went back and listened to all of the mixes I've done, of more modern contemporary stuff. They're kind of a little bit all over the place because I hadn't DJ'd properly for a long time. I sort of kind of ducked out of it around it was when my daughter was born, so it was like 22 odd years ago. So it probably about 2005. It really sort of like ducked down. And I used to do a lot of kind of odd old school nights, but you've got yeah, there's these mixes on there, and they're kind of like these weird hybrid things. But like now I've sort of found my sound again because I'm DJing a lot with DIY. There's DIY is 35 years old this year. So I'm playing with Smokescreen, who are a sound system from Nottingham that sort of took over the mantle after DIY couldn't do free parties anymore. So we're playing with them, and then playing for a guy who used to run these nights called Cultural Vibe in Cornwall. He's got like this little mini festival. It's not online at all. It's a word of mouth, invite only kind of thing. About 350 people turn up there. Cosmo Murphy's doing the Friday night, DIY doing the Saturday night, Calvin Andrews, and it's not John De Silva. It might be Justin Robinson actually. He's doing the Sunday night. Do you know what I mean? So it's old school, high quality, DJs playing probably more contemporary modern stuff. So yeah, you can find my stuff there. I'm getting out and about and playing at things. We've got going to Ibiza, playing in Pikes in October. There's a boat party in London in December. So there's a lot of there's opportunity to come and see us play live if that floats your boat and you're in the vicinity. Loads of mixes up on Mixcloud. So worth going and checking them out.
Please go check Pezz out. If you're back home in England and you see his name on a flyer or wherever you see it written on in a toilet in a toilet stall, go see him or check out his mixes. Thank you again, Pezz. I really appreciate it. We'll do a part 2 pretty soon. Thank you everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.